Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining our Friday weekly Lunch and Learn. Every Friday at noon, Sierra Club Iowa chapter goes live to give you an environmental update. And we have Wally Taylor, the Sierra Club Iowa chapter legal chair, joining us today to talk about endangered, threatened, and special concerned species and what we can do to make sure that we are protecting wildlife and especially endangered, threatened, and special concerned species here in the state. So Wally, I'll share my screen and you can kind of tell us what the DNR is proposing and what we can do about it.
Okay, thank you. Um, the Iowa DNR, Department of Natural Resources, um, has a list in their regulations of endangered, threatened, and special concern species. So first, let's look at some definitions. Um, an endangered species is any species of fish, plant, or wildlife which is in danger of extinction throughout all or a significant part of its range in Iowa. A threatened species is any species which is likely to become an endangered species within the foreseeable future throughout all or a significant portion of its range. And a species of special concern is any species about which problems of status or distribution are suspected but not documented. So these species of special concern are species that we need to watch and be concerned about, which is implied by the definition, and they may become threatened or endangered if we don't look at them carefully. An extinct, an extinct species is where the last member of the species has died. And unfortunately, over the years, we've had too many of those in Iowa. The current process for listing endangered, threatened, and special concern species is that they are published in the Iowa Administrative Rules. Every administrative agency, including the DNR, adopts administrative rules which are put into official rule book, so to speak, and they go through a process that we'll talk about in a minute. Um, the process includes the DNR, for example, in this case, deciding to adopt a regulation or a rule, and they internally within the agency draft the rule, and sometimes they will, what I call the pre-draft, send that out to stakeholders that the department thinks may be interested and may have some thoughts that would go into that rule before it's actually in a final draft. Then the the draft that is the final draft goes out to the public for public comment, and then after public comment is considered, then the rule is finalized and put into the official code of rules that the department has. With respect to the endangered, threatened, and special concern species, the lists have not been updated for animals since 2009 and for plants since 1994. So the DNR is now updating that rule, which is a good thing since it's been so long since they've done that. But and I should also mention that there is a list of federally endangered and threatened species. The list of the federal list is different and has many different species on it than the Iowa list, and vice versa. The Iowa list would have species that are not endangered or threatened federally. But so a species can be endangered in Iowa or threatened, but not be on the federal list. But on the other hand, all federally listed endangered and threatened species that exist in Iowa are on the state list automatically. So the state list is focused just on Iowa. Now, let's go to the next slide. The proposed changes in how the lists are maintained and published is a result of the governor's Executive Order 10, which Governor Reynolds issued back in January of 2023. And it requires all agencies, including the DNR, to review its administrative rules. And what it requires is all of the agency's rules have to be rescinded and then new rules adopted. The Executive Order 10 requires that all restrictive terms or mandatory terms such as shall, will, must, may not, required, prohibited, are taken out of the rules. So the rules become pretty much suggestions rather than rules. And it's supposed to remove unnecessary or duplicative language. For example, it requires any references to other rules or federal mandates, that kind of thing, to be referred to, but not set out in the rules. The theory is that the rules are too wordy. There are too many rules. They're too complex, and therefore the number of rules or the number of words or provisions in the rules should be reduced. And the most important and perhaps most troubling aspect of Executive Order 10 is the requirement that these rules, the new rules, should reduce what the governor calls the regulatory burden on entities and others that are supposed to be regulated by those rules. But in other words, what that means is it's reducing the protection provided by those rules. You know, the governor talks about regulation as being a bad thing, but really what it amounts to is the rules provide protection for all of us, for the environment. And that's what the governor is trying to do away with, is that protection. So let's go to the next slide. With respect to the endangered and threatened species list, what the Executive Order 10 is doing is requiring that rule, which lists all of the endangered, threatened, and special concern species, be rescinded and that a new rule be adopted. Well, the new rule does, in fact, add a few species to the endangered and threatened list, which is good, although it's bad in the sense that we have more endangered and threatened species, but it's good that they're being recognized after so many years of that rule being ignored. The problem, however, is that the DNR is removing the species of special concern list from the administrative rules in order to comply with the executive order. In other words, this is the DNR's way of complying with the Executive Order 10 by using fewer words, reducing the scope of the rule so that the species of special concern are not going to be there anymore. And this is significant because let's go to the next slide. They want to put the species of special concern on the DNR webpage. But that minimizes the importance of the species of special concern, because if it's not in the rule, it hasn't gone through the rulemaking process to get public comment. And the web page can be arbitrarily updated without any input from the public, and the DNR can just um, arbitrarily change the web page as it wills, and it doesn't go through the rulemaking process. It doesn't go through the legislative review that it does by being in the administrative rule. So it really takes away the recognition and importance of the species of special concern. And as we talked about initially, even though they're not threatened or endangered, species of special concern need to be followed and need to be identified so that they don't become threatened or endangered. And if they're not in the administrative rule, it just lacks the importance. It lacks the public acknowledgement that these are important species to be concerned about. And if you've ever tried to navigate the DNR's webpage, it's not all that easy. It's much easier to go to the administrative rules and see the list of special concern species there. So what's next? Go to the next page or the next slide. Because this is a rulemaking process, the DNR has to get public input. And so you can express your concern about the species of special concern by emailing the DNR. The two DNR employees are Kelly Poole and John Pearson. We have their email addresses there. There's also going to be a public hearing over Zoom. I think it's Zoom or one of the virtual platforms on September 24th at 10 o'clock in the morning. To obtain access to that virtual hearing, again, you can write an email to Kelly Poole and John Pearson to ask that you be given the link to that hearing. And you don't have to say much, but just say that you want that species of special concern list kept in the rule, and that it's just arbitrarily based on the governor's executive order 10 that it's being removed, and explain why it's important to keep that list in the rule. And that's really all you have to say. And hopefully the DNR will hear us and keep the list in there. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Wally. One question here is, can you tell us some of the animals that are on any of these lists?
I'm sorry?
Can you tell us some of the animals that are on any of these lists that, that people are probably familiar with?
I don't have the list in front of me. There's quite a long list, unfortunately. But gosh, I know one that's on the threatened list that has been dear to me because it stopped some highway projects, is the ornate box turtle. That's a species that we find mostly in the southern half of the state. It's a sand prairie species. There are a number of amphibians and reptiles, particularly, that are on the list. They're very fragile and very vulnerable to all of the pressures that are put on animals here in Iowa.
Yeah. Maybe we'll have to dig up this list and I'll post it in the comments later today so people
Okay.
can look. For those of you watching, I did put the email addresses for those two DNR employees in the comment section to make it easier to send them an email. But just remember, in order to get the link to join the hearing, you have to email them first. Wish it was set up differently, but that's how the DNR set this one up. So don't forget to send that email so you can get a link to join the hearing. And if you have any other questions, post those in the comments and we'll get to those later on in the day. And thank you very much, Wally, for following this and for being an advocate for different species here in the state. And we'll keep people updated as this hearing happens and what our comments are going to be.
Yeah,
So thank
thank
you,
you.
Wally. Thanks, everyone. Have a good weekend and we'll see you next week.